So I'm excited to announce our next panel, which is the market perspective on building resilience. And this panel is going to focus on people who are making chocolate and selling chocolate in different countries, and what is their perspective on how this industry is going to build resilience. We face a lot of challenges, especially coming out of the pandemic, and we want to create an industry that is going to survive and thrive for generations to come. So that is the focus of the next panel. I don't know if we have already our moderator in the room. Our moderator is Lauren Adler. Lauren, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Lauren?
Yeah, I'm here.
I think you're coming in. I will have to see if our technical person can fix that. It seems to be projecting my name on your feed.
Do you want me to leave and come back in a different link?
Yeah, that would work. If you could do that real quick, that would be great.
Stay tuned.
Thank you. And thank you so much to our audience. If you've been to any previous Zoom events, you know these sorts of things happen. It's different when we're not all just sitting on stage together. So thank you. I appreciate your patience. It looks like she is coming back. Lauren, are you back yet? Well, let's give her a minute.
Okay, I'm back.
There she is. Hi, Lauren.
Hello. Sorry about that.
Hey, good to see you.
Good
Thank
to see
you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. And hello to everybody.
And Lauren, you can go ahead and give a quick introduction. Tell us about you and your specialty and where you're from, and then we will bring on the rest of the panelists.
Okay, that sounds great. So my name is Lauren Adler. I am the founder of Chocolopolis, which was a retail store in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. I now do online tastings and events, but I've been in the craft and small batch chocolate industry since about 2007. So I've been around for a while, and I'm currently the president of the board of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association. Very excited to be here and have a great conversation today.
Well, we're excited to have you. Thanks so much for making time for it. All right, well, we can bring on the next group of panelists, and we can have you intro them, Lauren, and I will leave you to it. You have an hour and 15 minutes, and at the last 10 minutes, again, we'll have some audience questions for you, and I'll pop back in magically.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay,
so
great.
Just
Thanks
make sure
so
I can
much.
see all my panelists here.
Yeah, I see some of them.
There's Jody.
Hi, Jody. Jenny is there too.
Okay,
Everyone can turn your
turn on your video.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, as I said, my name is Lauren Adler. I'm going to be your moderator today. We have a wonderful group of panelists. I'm going to ask them to each spend a minute or two introducing themselves. So since I can see Jody, I'm going to go ahead and ask Jody to start.
Sure. Hi, Lauren. I'm Jody Hayden from Grocer's Daughter Chocolate in Northern Michigan. We've been in business since 2004, doing specialty confections, clean ingredient confections the entire time. I purchased the business from a dear friend in 2013, along with my husband. We operate a brick and mortar store that is our primary revenue source, but we also have wholesale and e-commerce channels, and we're about to open a gelato shop next month. So we're expanding into frozen treats, and we'll talk more about that. My background is in specialty coffee. I started a roasting company here in Northern Michigan in 2001. It was one of the first fair trade coffee roasting companies in the US. So I love being in chocolate. It's a new challenge, and chocolate's a lot harder than coffee, in my opinion, both to make and profitability wise. And so, yeah, I look forward to being part of the panel today.
Wonderful. Jenny, are you available and ready to introduce yourself? There we go. And Jenny, our wonderful founder of the Cacao and Chocolate Summit.
Hello, Lauren. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Jenny Samaniego. I am the founder of Conexión Chocolate. Conexión Chocolate is a company based at origin in Ecuador. We make two types of chocolate. I will say chocolate for professionals with our couverture chocolates and chocolate bars for chocolate lovers, right? And what's special about Conexión is that we work directly with cacao producers, with the cacao associations, and also we make chocolate of different provinces of the country. So you can really taste the different terroirs in each of our single chocolate. I think it's very exciting for us being, of course, a woman-owned company based on origin, and being able to bring to the market these chocolate couvertures. I think it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, and we're very excited and happy to talk about it. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up, I'll ask Arcelia Gallardo from Mission Chocolate to introduce herself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Arcelia Gallardo, and I'm the owner and chocolate maker of Mission Chocolate, which is based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And our whole goal here at Mission Chocolate is to create chocolate bars that don't really exist in this world by using native and wild ingredients to Brazil.
Okay, thank you, Arcelia. And finally, Spencer Hayman from Cocoa Runners.
Hi, so thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you very much, everybody else, for being here. So my name is Spencer. I'm one of the co-founders of Cocoa Runners. So we run around the world, as the name suggests, trying to find the world's best craft chocolate bars. Everyone, including Jenny, so everywhere from sort of, San Francisco to Saigon, Woodstock, Warsaw, Brooklyn, Budapest, etc. And then we ship them all over the world too. And we've been doing it for about 7 or 8 years now. And my background before then was a little bit like Lauren. I was at Amazon for quite a long time. And then I did things like LinkedIn and Last.fm, but I've always had a passion for chocolate, and it's very exciting to be here with you all. And just to let you know, it's mainly an online operation that we do. We do also wholesale in Europe, but it's primarily an online operation based out of the UK, but we do ship everywhere in the world and source from everywhere in the world too.
Great, thank you guys. So I think I just want to set a little bit of context, and then we're going to dive into what I hope will be a very innovative and interesting discussion. So the title of this panel is The Market Perspective on Building Resilience. So I thought, okay, let's look up the word resilient just so we can be very clear about what that means. And the two definitions were the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. So I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And let me just set the context. I think that, it's great. We've got 3 continents represented: South America, North America, and Europe. We have 2 bean to bar makers who source directly from smallholder cacao farmers in Ecuador and Brazil. We have an American chocolatier who imports chocolate from Ecuador and whose business is heavily driven by a strong tourist trade in the summer. And we have a UK-based retailer who offers an extensive selection of bean-to-bar chocolate from around the world and sells it around the world. So I think we've got a pretty diverse group here in terms of the types of things they've probably seen as business owners and the perspectives they can bring. So I wanted to start by asking each of you to spend a minute or two talking about what is the biggest adaptation you've had to make in the last 2 years, and what areas do you expect to have to adapt in the future? And I'm going to start with Jenny.
So for us, right, a lot has happened with the pandemic and also on trying to grow the business. But I will say that for us, the biggest adaptation that we have to say is to set processes. It was very important for us dealing through the pandemic to be able to make to continue actually producing our I forgot the word, to continue consistent chocolate, to be able to work directly with the producers and start making systems that allowed us to be able to keep the quality for our customers.
And do you see, are there areas you expect you're going to have to keep adapting in the future, or do you think you've kind of adapted and you're ready to go?
We'll definitely have to adapt constantly. I think one of the areas, of course, that we have to watch out now, for example, is the costs, the increment of the inflation that's happening right now, right? We're seeing already a 3.5% of inflation that's happening in the country in general, and we see already the increment in our cost of goods sold. Besides, of course, the cost of shipping, right? That has been already increased. I think we pay double or more than 100%, I will say, in our last export. And as well, we have in Ecuador, and overall, I will say the problem that the free trade hasn't been signed yet between Ecuador and the US. So this, of course, causes more increase on the price for us. So there are many things that we have to adapt.
So let me turn to Jody, because Jody, you're buying chocolate from Jenny, right? So I'm curious, what is the biggest adaptation you've had to make in the past years, and how do you expect to adapt in the future?
Yeah, I'm happy to be saying that it's not a supply chain issue. Because of our relationship with Jenny, we've been able to have plenty of chocolate. And I keep hearing that among other chocolatiers around us, that they ran out of chocolate the past couple of years. The biggest adaptation, I think, for us is labor inflation rates. So from 2019 to last year, we had a 43% increase in our labor costs. And I am a huge proponent for paying more to our service workers. It's just that it's not happening incrementally. It happened very, very quickly. And so, we have to pass that cost down at some point to our customers. And we hate doing that, obviously. Our customers, everybody's getting hit with inflation right now, but we have to do it. And we have a very loyal customer base, so we're fortunate about that. But I see that's going to be a challenge going forward. The other thing for us is that we, because of the pandemic, really had to constrain our space and change our operations. So we weren't letting customers inside anymore. And so their experience with us changed. And we are an experience-driven business for sure. And so our touch point with our customers was quick, and it was really different for us. And so we were trying to give our customers the same experience, but without being able to smile at them and without being able to welcome them into our store. And so we spent a lot of time and energy figuring out how to do that online. And we're coming out of that. So that feels good.
Okay. Spencer, let me turn to you. What's been the biggest adaptation you've had to make in the past years, and do you see more adaptations in the future?
Yeah, so thank you. So I think not necessarily adaptations, but I think one of the biggest tragedies was we did lose, unfortunately, some really great chocolate makers in the pandemic, which is, so sort of, I think on a, personal and professional level, we really, really sadly miss some of those people, everyone from sort of Maru, Sam, and everything else from that. I think on a, in terms of the opportunities to sort of try and sort of, look on the brighter side, we lost overnight a huge chunk of the wholesale distribution business we had, just because physical retail, and in particular coffee stores, weren't there. But as Jody was sort of saying, I think that one of the things which is really important with craft chocolate is that we have to find a way to explain to our consumers what is craft chocolate and why is it different and how is it different. And I think coffee has always had, and physical retail has always had, a better opportunity to try and do that. And I think, ironically, one of the things which actually came out of the pandemic was the idea of virtual tastings. So the idea that, you could, instead of what we used to do was basically have people come together and, get them to taste lots of different makers from lots of different places, explain to them, what the difference fermentation would make, explain to them what a difference roasting would make, and actually get them to taste the difference and show them, the wonderful work that Jenny's doing and all that sort of important stuff. And then we basically couldn't do that anymore. So we flipped it so that we were basically shipping literally all over the world boxes of taster bars where we could, and Jenny took part of this too, and lots of other craft chocolate makers did too, so that we were actually able to reach people. And I think in a strange way, actually, maybe we can talk about this later, virtual tastings in some ways are actually better than physical tastings. They're a little bit like sort of Peloton versus having to go to the gym. They're a little bit, there isn't one person who can sort of be there and shout out and tell you what you should all be tasting, what you should all know. It's much more, you can make them much more interactive and get people more involved. So I think, on a positive side, I think that virtual tastings give craft chocolate something which it's never really had before, which is an opportunity to really explain to customers what the difference is. You sort of get that when you go to a pub and you get someone to explain to you what, these new craft beers are all about. And you get that when you go to a coffee store too. So I think that's the sort of the biggest opportunity that we saw. But then, yeah, sure. I mean, there are, in the UK, we've inflicted this amazing self-harm called Brexit, which is, an absolute nightmare, which compounds all the other issues we've got in terms of, rising costs, difficulties with bringing goods in, and the whole legacy of the pandemic. But, hopefully it's onwards and upwards. So that.
Yeah, I just want to add to, so like Spencer, I do online tastings, and you're right. I mean, for the US, which, is a very geographically dispersed place, it's been great in that, you can get people wanting to do tastings from all over the country. You get corporate groups who wouldn't have thought of, hiring someone in Seattle to do a tasting years ago. And now they are happy to do it. And everybody's kind of shifted their mindset to be willing to do these virtual events where you ship out the chocolate and then you do something. So that has been, I know for us as well, a big innovation.
I mean, for us, it's been fantastic because it means that someone like you, Lauren, who, people know of in Europe, but haven't yet always had the chance to meet, we could introduce, you to, 100 or so of customers who could get to hear your perspective, your approach to tasting. And I think that we've managed to sort of make it a much more accessible. I mean, I think we reckoned a couple of weeks ago that we'd actually managed to sort of now actually do virtual tastings for over 10,000 people in the space of a year, which we'd never managed to sort of reach that number. And that is literally people tasting the craft chocolate as well as experiencing it. That doesn't include the people who just dial in without the chocolate. So, I mean, and it's great to have people like you, teaching people different perspectives too. So, yeah.
Great. And Arcelia, so what has been the biggest adaptation that you've had to make, and do you see more adaptations in your future?
I think the entire pandemic was a shift of adaptations, right? So first it was like online sales exploding, and all the stuff you got rid of, now you need it back because you need someone to fulfill online orders. And now that the pandemic is over, people want face-to-face interaction. And so this constant shift of now we're putting all our power into online sales. Well, wait. Now people want in-person events again. And wait, now the corporates are back. And so honestly, like being a chocolate maker is like the definition of resilience. It's like you constantly have to shift and move according to trends and your customers and new concepts like TikTok, right? Like who saw that coming? Like nobody saw that coming. And I talked about TikTok in the beginning of the pandemic, and now I see so many chocolate makers on it, which is really good, or chocolate people. And so we are just constantly trying to stay like alive and with the trends. And so one of the bigger resiliencies that we face is, or the biggest shift that we've had to do is really ask ourselves, because we really don't like getting employees and then telling them you can't be here anymore. And then, oh, can you please come back? We made a mistake. And then, oh, now you can't be here again. And so before we start hiring again, we really try to ask ourselves, like, is there an app that can do this better than a human? And if not, then we obviously will go with the human. But we really try to use technology to our advantage. And so we really have learned that in the last few years, right? Whether it's the online tastings, the online classes, or is it now so much has developed for people to work from home or people to mechanize systems and processes. So we really ask, like, is there something in AI that can help us do this so that we can focus on other things? And so for us, it's really been that. It's been trying to use technology to our advantage.
Great. So we've kind of touched on pricing a little bit, and I'm seeing some comments from the audience. So let's dive into the rising prices, which you've alluded to. It would be helpful to know, in what part of your business have rising costs had the biggest impact? I know Jody mentioned labor, and I'm guessing that might be one for everybody. How do you adjust for those? And then how have your customers responded? I know, like Jody, you said it's one thing to support an increased wage in the service sector. It's another to have it all come at once. But maybe you all can talk about how it's impacted your team, and then how customers are responding, and how you've thought about raising your own prices with all of those variables. And I'm going to open this up. Who would like to go first? Maybe a hand raise? Okay, I'm going to call on Arcelia.
I can go first, Lauren.
Thank you.
So in Brazil, we also faced increased labor prices, which was honestly not the biggest hit. Like for us, what we're seeing as like the biggest increase is farmers have to pay now a lot more for gas to run all of their machines. Farmers now have to pay a lot more for fertilizer. So the fertilizer issue in Brazil has actually been humongous because now also of like the Russia-Ukraine situation. And so the cost for the farmer, for the producer, has increased a lot. And so they are sending some of this cost over to us. So all of our cocoa prices in Brazil increased, all of them. And not enough, because the farmer, the producer, is still really suffering with this. And so even though we had labor price increase, for us, the biggest shock that we're seeing is that what's happening on the producer's level on the farm, and that small hike that we had in cocoa prices, but that still really isn't like enough for the producer, because what's happening also, every producer in Brazil sells to industry, they sell to the commodity market, and they sell to craft chocolate makers as well. And so the price for them from a year ago has probably fallen in half what they're able to sell to the general market. And so that is really hard on them. And so that we're the smaller buyers, that we're trying to work together and figure out like, how can we make this better? Craft chocolate for a customer is already expensive, right? Like pre-pandemic, it's so hard to explain to a person like why they need to pay above $4 for a chocolate bar, and now it's like doubled. And so it really is about like having that communication with your clients, with your supporters, with your fans, right?
I'm curious. I think what I just heard you say is that the farmers' costs have increased, but they're getting about half of what they were. So they're really in a tough position then.
Correct.
Yeah. Jenny, how have you seen that? How has that impacted you in Ecuador?
Right. So I think I will talk again here about our two different niches of markets first. And sorry, going back to the origin, I will say that here in Ecuador we don't have problem with hiring people. And I think the problem that we have over here is, in our case, might be prepaying the cacao for the producers. We currently work with 5 cacao cooperatives, and before, like, we used to pay them with the order, but now they need the money up front. Or before. So I think that's also that, if you are in a small company, of course, that will impact on your cash flow as well. And then passing this cost to our customers, I was saying before, is a challenge. And then it comes to the fact that Conexión Chocolate is a company focused mostly on the B2B consumers, like, chocolatiers. We do also make bars, but the 65% on more of our sales are to chocolatiers. So for chocolatiers that aren't yet familiarized with the quality of chocolate that we're making, or like how are we also making these sustainable and ethical chocolate couvertures, it makes it a little bit more difficult to raise the price. And also having the access, to communicate maybe one-to-one or explain face-to-face to the chocolatiers makes it more difficult. So, of course, even if we don't want it, we will have to do it. As I said before, like, for us at Ecuadorian businesses, we have a big impact in prices, first for logistics matters, and second, as well, for the free trade that hasn't been put in place yet. So we will have to adapt, the prices, and we'll see how the market is going to react.
So let's go to Jenny then, or Jody, who is purchasing chocolate from Jenny. So we've got the full supply chain and pricing going here. I'm curious, how have the rising prices, I know you said labor, but how have the other rising prices affected you? And how do you adjust, and how are consumers responding?
Right. Yeah. So transportation, like Jenny said, the freight for our shipments of chocolate has gone up considerably. And again, we have to add it, to the per pound cost. We are doing, a container load at a time usually. And so that's spread across 27,000 pounds. So, it's pennies, but pennies definitely matter. I think in our shop, I always joke about this. We're like 50% education and 50%, craft confection sellers, because we are trying to tell our customers, and we even train our staff this, we are never going to apologize for the price of our chocolate because people should actually be paying more. Of course, we understand, like, as you scale, some of those costs go down, but, we're at that place where we're not just an owner operator model anymore. We're building a brand. And so we really want to bring our customers along with us to realize, like, it's not just the value of chocolate, but coffee and sugar and all these other things have been really inexpensive for Americans for a long, long time. And we should pay more so that the farmers aren't, experiencing what Arcelia described. And so we do a lot of that. We do a lot of tastings. We do thousands a year as well. And all of this is kind of built into our tasting education. And so, yeah, I mean, we're doing our best, but, we source a lot of fruit, all of our dairy locally in Michigan, and we have really great relationships with farmers. And so our costs there are going up incrementally, but nothing like labor. Labor and transportation are big.
Yeah, that'll do it. And I think too, having, when I had Chocolopolis, we were making our own bonbons, and it's, when you're a small scale manufacturer, as it were, it's really hard because you're producing this very high end product, Jenny, but you're never going to get, or maybe you will someday, but getting those economies of scale on the manufacturing side are just not there. And I think consumers are so used to cheap chocolate, and it's cheap for so many reasons: the raw materials, the labor, the mechanization, every part of it. So. All right, Spencer. So you're at the end of the supply chain now. How have rising prices affected you? How are you, communicating that to customers, and how are they responding?
So, I mean, obviously, everybody's got increased prices, but I think, as has been said a couple of times here, I mean, the whole point about craft chocolate is that it's not commodity chocolate, so it shouldn't be sold off price. I mean, it's certainly not a giffen good, so that, it isn't sort of, more valuable because it gets more expensive. But I think what you have to do is to explain to people that if you want something which is going to have amazing flavor, if you want something which is not going to destroy the environment, if you want something where the farmers get properly paid, then, you can't have a bar for a couple of bucks. There was a sort of interesting question there just a minute ago coming through, which is, why is it that the supermarket bars haven't been going up? And I think that there are a couple of aspects to that. One aspect to it is that they are commodity products. And the biggest commodity they've got, of course, is not chocolate, it's sugar. But the second thing is that if you look at the sizing of those bars, they've gone down. And then similarly, if you look at the price that they're paying to the farmers of everything, they're not increasing that despite all the other pressures. Sort of putting all that to one side, though, just quickly, I think the issue from a retail perspective, in particular in the UK, is actually these transport costs have absolutely crucified us in terms of bringing stuff in and shipping stuff out. We really struggled for a long time of getting stuff into the UK. I mean, it is now faster for us to ship to the US than it is to ship to Germany or France, and it's more reliable, which is completely insane. It is also easier for us now to bring in from America and to bring in from Ecuador, although it's still more expensive, than it is to bring in from Europe, which is, just a crazy situation that we've done to ourselves. And it's actually less the cost increase. I mean, there is definitely a cost increase, but it's actually just much more the unreliability of it. And so the way we've tried to deal with it is just by getting better at forward planning and by basically buying more ahead of time, because we just don't know how long it's going to take to bring stuff in and deal with it there. I mean, I think that this issue of price is, we're seeing the very, very first waves of this. This is only going to get more pressing and more of a problem. So I think the more that we can do to reach out and just sort of stress that, the whole point is that we're not dealing with a commodity. We're not trying to basically make it as cheaply as possible. We are basically all about trying to reveal the flavor of the bean and not show how smart we can be with added synthetic ingredients in mass production to try and deal with it. So, I mean, I think what Jody sort of said is you should never be embarrassed about the price. I mean, I think you should delight in sort of saying, look, the great thing about these bars is, Jenny has a number of initiatives whereby, she'll tell people how much she's giving to the cooperatives. I'm sorry, I pronounced that completely wrong, but those sorts of things I think are absolutely fantastic, and focusing more on those is what we need to sort of do. But it's educating consumers to realize that, you can know the price of everything but the value of nothing. And you're in this because basically it's healthier for you, it's better for you, it's better for the farmers, it's better for the planet. So, and that we're going to have challenges, and they're just going to get worse. So we just have to, knuckle down on the messaging, I think, and at the same time, just be smarter about how we bring in and what we do and how we focus.
Great. So does anybody have anything else they want to share on pricing, price increases, or how they're communicating that before I move on to some supply chain questions? Okay. So I'm curious what supply shortages you've faced recently, domestic versus international, like, how does that played out? And have you had to find alternative products to cover some of your supply chain shortages, if they even exist? So I think I'm going to start with Jody on this one.
Yeah, we, again, are really lucky to have the partnership with Jenny. We buy usually 18 months of inventory at a time. And so we happen to time both of these shipments recently, kind of at perfect times, so that we never did run out of chocolate. And chocolate is our main ingredient. We use very little added sugar in any of our confections. I think for us, some of our packaging ran out. So we do all compostable packaging, and we use paper from Michigan. And so we ran out of some of our compostable, package stock. So for a short time, we had to transition to something else, but we're back to our regular stuff now. Yeah, so we've been fortunate with supply chain issues. We haven't run out of too many things.
And was that packaging coming from overseas?
Yeah, so it's a cornstarch plastic, and it's made in China. Yeah.
And do you get a sense that they're out of that, or you're worried you're going to run into more supply chain issues going forward?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to do to compensate for our increasing labor costs is to shift our packaging again to another compostable material, but it's about $1 per unit cheaper. We pay a lot for our packaging currently. And that product is from China. And I'm really concerned about this shift because it's all custom done. And so, right now what we've been doing is a local paper manufacturer and a local printer. And so they're all local and they're easy to work with. And we have a great relationship with them. When we move to these companies that are overseas for a better material and a cheaper material, we're making these trade-offs that are really, really difficult, but I am concerned. Anytime there's something that's going to be held up at a port, especially on the West Coast, it's concerning, I think. Yeah.
So let me turn it to Arcelia. If you can talk about supply chain shortages you faced, domestic versus international. Maybe you can talk about how much of your product is sourced domestically in Brazil, and have you had to find alternatives?
So we are pretty lucky that Sao Paulo is not like Brazil. Like Sao Paulo is, a huge city, and we do source almost 100% of everything from Brazil. Brazil can supply us with almost everything that we need. The one thing that I did fall short of is cocoa butter. So for all of our dark chocolates, we press our own cocoa butter, but for our white chocolates and our milk, we purchase Brazilian cocoa butter. And the price increased so much because they were not producing enough of it that I had to call the company, and I was like, look, we don't have any money, but I need the cocoa butter. So what can you offer me? Like, what do you have? Like, don't tell me what you don't have, tell me what you do have. And so then they're like, well, we've been working on this other cocoa butter that we are pressing from another theobroma. And so it turns out that they've been pressing cocoa butter from Theobroma cupuaçu. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why haven't I heard about this? Why don't I have this? Why haven't you sent me flyers every time you deliver the other cocoa butter to me? Because I thought this is like the greatest thing on earth, because the cocoa butter or the cupuaçu butter, it grows wild for the most part. And because they just don't have enough of a market for it, they're not talking about it, they're not selling it. And so, and it's almost half as much as cocoa butter. And so I was like, send me tons of this right now. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but the idea of butter from another theobroma is like spectacular to me, right? Not too many other countries have access to this. And so this downfall for me, this idea that, cocoa butter was in shortage, we couldn't afford it anymore, led me to cupuaçu butter, which we're now putting on everything because we don't know we are so excited about it. We don't even know what to do with it. It doesn't act the same way as cocoa butter, so we can't just interchange one for the other. Cupuaçu butter is softer. And so anyway, so for us, this negative thing really turned into something positive.
Well, it sounds like I was going to ask you all what was the biggest innovation from all of this, and it sounds like that might be the winner for biggest innovation. I'm curious, what is it? How is the taste? Is it deodorized or not?
It doesn't really have a strong taste. If you look at it, you would just say it's cocoa butter. It's only when you press it that it's just softer. It's not as hard as cocoa butter. And we've been testing it in chocolate. So if I don't tell you it's in there, you would not know. It's just we have to do a different type of a temper for it in order for it to snap the same. But you go a little overboard and it'll just be soft. So anyways, we love it. I will take some when I go everywhere because I think everyone should be able to have a little bit of this cupuaçu butter.
That's fabulous. All right, Jenny, you've kind of spoken a little bit about this, but I'm hoping you can elaborate on the supply chain or supply shortages you faced. I'm assuming all of yours is domestic, but maybe I'm wrong. And then if you've had to find alternatives.
Sure. So a little bit to explain for everyone to understand what's Conexión doing. And I think we're kind of covering the whole supply chain over here. Conexión Chocolate buy directly the cacao beans from the cacao producers. We make the chocolate in origin in Ecuador. Ourselves, we import the chocolate to the US. And in the US, we have our own distribution system. So we're a little... and a small company, but covering pretty much the whole supply chain. So in this case, regarding on the chocolate making part, I would say that I don't want to be too positive here, but we have been lucky enough, and of course, this is the result of the relationships that we have developed with our cacao producing companies or cooperatives, that we hadn't had any issue on the cacao in getting the cacao beans. We have some issues in the other ingredients as well. And the milk, the coffee was very difficult this time to get the same coffee from the coffee producers that we're working with. And the other issue that we had also was with paper. So trying to get the cartons for packaging the chocolate overtures. And then the other big impact that we had was on the lack of containers, I will say, and trying we have to really try to work very hard over here on seeing how we can kind of lower the cost of importing the chocolate. So I think that has been for us the big impact regarding prices. But then overall, I will say that I don't know if it's that we have been so lucky, but maybe also staying in Ecuador and being able to make a call or run from one company to another or one producer to another. We haven't had much shortages, and I'm also super happy, to be working in this partnership relationship with Grocer's daughter, and also now trying to open our products to different supporters and connection lovers in the market, that we have been able to have supply for them as well in the US. So it was also another opportunity because many more other customers were able to taste Conexión and were able to hear from us and see what we're doing. So that's how our journey here.
I think it's interesting because all of you, and this is true for many in our industry, but I think for you in particular, there's so many direct relationships. I mean, Jenny, between you and the farmers, Arcelia, you as well, in countries of origin, and then Jenny and Jody, and then Spencer, working directly with all of these chocolate makers. It is, I think, a testament to the relationships you have as well, that in a time of uncertainty, it helps to have that relationship. So Spencer, you talked a little bit about Brexit. I'm curious and how that may have impacted you on supply shortages and other things. And you mentioned that it was almost easier to get things from the US and Ecuador. I'm curious if there are other supply shortages you faced or how the container issue affected you. Was Brexit bigger? Was that bigger? Were there other things that impacted you from a supply chain perspective?
So, I mean, I think, the container issues, impacted everybody. I mean, I think, it's brought home this issue of, paper supplies and box supplies all coming out of China. We suffered from that the same way as everybody else. I think there's a sort of silver lining to it as well, which came up because of the virtual tastings. When we do the virtual tastings, we basically try and provide everybody with the same chocolates. But we try and give people an option as to whether or not they want a family pack, which we can basically do by sending out 10 big bars, or what we call a sort of singles or a couples pack. And the singles or the couples pack is to basically have, mini bars, or what Jenny's done for us is to basically produce, small buttons of the couverture, which is the same as the bars. And what we were able to do actually is work with a bunch of different makers in the US, so people like Fresco, but also in Europe. So, we actually got some makers who pride themselves normally on their wonderful packaging and everything else like that. But for us as an online retailer, yes, the packaging helps and everything else like that. But actually what we really want people to do is just to taste the chocolate. So we actually managed to sort of break the brand police of a couple of different people and actually get them to agree just to giving us, tasters and samplers, which you could put into small bags. Now, I know that's much more difficult and it's much more labor consuming, but actually as a way to sort of get people to think about different flavors and, giving you the opportunity for a relatively, less expensive price than having to buy 10 big bars. I think that sort of, innovation sort of definitely helps a bit. And then, of course, the inevitable happens, which is that because of Brexit, all the careful hard work in sourcing these samples, they will go and get stuck at customs. But we had that happen a number of times. So, that's sort of just the way it is. But I think that is one lesson we've learned, which is that we all think that the packaging is incredibly important. And I'm sure for physical retail, it is really, really important. But actually, if you're trying to educate customers remotely and virtually, you don't really need to worry quite so much about the packaging. You just need to worry about basically finding a format whereby people can try these different flavors from different beans and from different fermentations in a much easier way, which, which we have now managed to do, which is great.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that because I'm doing the virtual online tastings and I ran into the same issue as Spencer, where there aren't that many companies doing the small mini bars. And yes, you're using couverture and repackaging it, but I no longer have a food safe space to do that. So I'm looking for prepackaged minis or small bars. And, I'm very limited in what I can use. And, when you're doing these tastings, I think to what you're alluding to, Spencer, you can't outprice the market, right? And we've got to ship these things and you have to add in that cost of shipping. And in the US, where it's a big country with a lot of heat, sometimes you have to, I do 2-day shipping. So if you don't want to overprice and make sure that people are going to do this and try it, having those mini bars has become so much more important, I feel, since COVID, at least for me and for probably people doing tastings, than it used to be. In the store, I could put all the, as you said, the packaging did help, but I could put out the full size bars. But now that we're doing tastings, it's like, we really need smaller bars. And at first I was focused on the little minis, but now there's enough people doing small bars that aren't crazy priced that, we can do small bars and tastings. So you just add that. That was my adaptation. All right, so let's turn to staffing and who and how you hire. I'm curious. I know Jody has alluded to the crazy labor prices, but has it changed the way that you hire people and how you find them? And how has the labor shortage impacted your business? And then how are you hiring? Is it different than what you used to hire for? Let me start with Jody on this one.
Yeah, and so we hired an HR consultant last year to help us figure some of this out because we realized how tricky it would be. And I think, it really started for us when the pandemic set in, and then we had, the George Floyd murder here. And there was this sense, I think, of just kind of dread overall. We were trying to come out of the pandemic, and I think we were always a values-driven company, but at that moment in time, we felt like we needed to put our values out even more forward and make sure that we're in Northern Michigan in a very rural area, that we were a welcoming employer. and that, and that we wanted to pay industry leading wages and let people know that. And so we've had a lot of people come to us because our values are out there and it's very clear where we stand as a business. And so that's been immensely helpful. And so, this consultant we hired last year did a review of all the labor around us that she could find. And she's also kind of an expert in designing job descriptions, like something as simple as a job announcement, right? But also telling us, like, what do you need to tell people? Because in our market here, it's a workers market. They can come and go, and they can get $20 an hour at a fast food restaurant, and that's really hard to compete with, right? And so we have to compete with flexible schedules and a really great work environment. And what we've learned is that our staff loves to learn about chocolate, and they like to be, part of something that has a purpose. And so we really are just cultivating that part of our business. We took all of our production team to a lean training yesterday. And so, whether they stay with us or go somewhere else, we just want them to develop as leaders and as people. Yeah. And so, we hire based on a good fit for our values more than anything else.
I wanted to go to Arcelia. I'm curious what the labor market is like in Brazil and if you've had to adapt and how you're hiring people.
Yeah, the labor market in Brazil is doing pretty well. We have a lot of people that are looking for work. Obviously, nobody knows how to make chocolate. And so for us, it's all about doing 6-week contracts. We do 12-week contracts. And if we love them, then we offer to hire them. And so this is the way we've been able to do our hiring. Initially it was, okay, you're breathing, let's go make chocolate. But then we realized that they need to be a right fit for us and for the other people. And so then we started doing these 6-week contracts. And then we figure out if we want to hire them or not. But we don't have a shortage of people in Brazil. We actually have an excess of people looking for work. And so, yeah.
Oh, that's good. And Jenny, how about you? What's the labor situation like in Ecuador, and have you had to change how you're hiring people?
Well, I think it's very similar to what Arcelia just mentioned, and I'm pretty sure many people who want to go to the US for work. So, I think we actually have a big number of people without work, actually. It's the opposite of what's happening in the US. And of course, this is the effects of the pandemic. And as Conexión, I will say that for us, the pandemic was extremely good in this case, because we were able to reinforce our team. We were able to incorporate a general manager that has a wonderful experience in many years in the hospitality industry. That was a big add-in for us. We were able as well to set our processes, and maybe from being an entrepreneurial startup, I would say that we are now a real business, and so that has been very good for us. And our team has grown as well. We have also hired in the US a salesperson. So for us, COVID, I will say that it hasn't been bad, but the most important is through the pandemic as well, we have been also trying to focus on our values and in our mission as well, and strength is also. So again, with our partners in the Cacao Summit, we have been able to keep the last year and this year also the Cacao and Chocolate Summit happening. So all of it, I will say, was through the effects of the pandemic, because we have been able to internationalize this event, and now many people have another source of information or can gather more opportunities or learn from each other. So that's in our case.
That's a really good point. Here we are. Spencer, I know you have an online model, so I don't know how much labor would affect you, but please talk to us about it.
It does affect us a bit. I mean, so I think we've got sort of indirectly, well, let's start with the direct stuff. So for us, the key thing is we're very lucky we have a great warehouse team, and it's not located a little bit like what Jody's sort of alluding to where she is. I mean, we're lucky that it's not, in the middle of Manhattan or in the middle of London, because then it really would be hard. I mean, to sort of get more people, but we're very lucky. We've been working with them since the get-go. They're really great people, and that's fantastic. So from the angle of our warehouse and our logistics, that's worked really well. I think ironically, actually, another challenge that we've been having actually though is that third-party logistics, everything from the Royal Mail through to DHL and DPD, they're really struggling to get people at the moment. So but that's sort of outside of our control. Because as you said though, Lauren, we are an online business. The challenge we've got is that, if you think you've got labor shortages in most areas, in digital marketing and in software writing, it's a really big problem. I mean, fortunately, we're a fairly small team. Fortunately, again, because we focus on, the fact that we believe in what we're trying to do, we've been able to hire people who, as everyone else is sort of saying, is focusing on the values, focusing on the good that they can get out of it. And just, it's the great thing about craft chocolate is, there are very, very few other products. In fact, I can't think of any product you can really pick where by changing people's consumption, they can make a massive difference to their own health and a massive difference to the environment and a massive difference to the farmers. And so, we sort of use that almost as our hook when we're trying to get everything from interns to people. And, there are enough people out there who care about this that we can, we've been able to sort of ride the storm a bit and been very lucky and attracted some really great people.
I will say, I think all of us know, being in the chocolate industry, that being in the chocolate industry is a great selling point for anybody you want to hire.
Yeah, that definitely helps too.
Yeah. So let me turn briefly to origins. Jenny, these are specifically questions for Jenny and Arcelia, and you've talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to find out if you could elaborate a little bit more on ways you've seen the cacao growers adapting to meet the market realities. And so Arcelia, I'll start with you.
So what I had previously said was that about a year ago, the same cocoa producers that we buy cocoa from were able to sell their commodity cocoa for about, I did the translation here to dollars. So last year they were selling for $3.50 a kilo. And at this moment, they're able to sell for $2 a kilo at the same time where everything is going up for them. So labor costs, gas, fertilizers, everything. And so we make up, with the craft chocolate buyers that these producers have, make up less than 20% of their customers. So that means that 60%, 70%, for some people, maybe 80% is going to the commodity market. And so what are they able to do? They can't increase our price so much that then we're not even able to purchase, because we're not really the ones that are going to help them, right? It's really the commodity price that needs to be increased. And so the changes that we have seen with our cocoa producers is that they are calling us more often. I have all my cocoa producers on WhatsApp, and so they're like, okay, you asked for this much cacao. Are you sure this is what you're going to need? Because this is, for them, they have to process it separately, right? They cannot be stuck with cocoa that they processed for us. And so they're calling us more often. They're checking in. They're like, are you still in business? Are you still going to need this ton or these 2 tons that you asked for? Do you know anyone that could need this cocoa? Because they really don't want to sell to the commodity market. They don't want to sell to the commodity market. I don't know if anyone knows that. What they do, what they want to do is they want to process better cocoa so that more craft chocolate makers purchase it. And so really this shift is not going to come from them increasing our price. It's going to have to come from the market at large, right? And so we are just constantly trying to motivate each other, to keep each other going, because we don't want them to go out of business for sure, and they don't want us to go out of business. And so the pandemic has really brought us closer, I would say, me and all of my producers. The farmers, in the last year, I have been able to visit all of them finally. And so we're just trying to figure it all out, I would say, together, right, here being in Brazil.
Well, and I'm curious, are you buying more from them? Or I know Jenny earlier said that she often has to pay in advance. Do you find that you're running into those situations as well?
Yeah, so when she said that, I made a mental note, because in Brazil, what we get is usually 15 to 30 days to pay. And so at least I have not been asked for the money yet upfront. It's usually 15 days after delivery or 30 days.
Okay, interesting. All right, Jenny, how about you? Can you talk a little bit more about, ways? Obviously, one of the ways is that they're asking for payment up front, but I'm curious if there are other things you've seen cacao growers do to try to adapt to the market realities.
Right. I think everything goes to the basics again. I think the pandemic, of course, has hit us, has hit, of course, producers. But the important here, I think, is the foundation of everything. And in this case, the presentation that Christian Martin did before in the previous panel was awesome. And maybe I'm going to touch a couple of points that he mentioned is the associativity. For example, in Ecuador, I will kind of bring this a little bit more broad, is that we're seeing that there is a big associativity, issues, which of course affect the individual producers. So I will say that if the producers in this case are able to work together, and of course they are going to be able to be more resilient in this case. But with all the cooperatives that we worked so far, we've seen that some of them have been again able to be very resilient in this case. Some of them have unfortunately had a lot of struggles, but it depends again on the type of organization and administration that they are trying to deal with. So for us, seeing of course these problems with the associations, we have been working with them directly in, I will say, in trying to strengthen their administration systems as well, and being able, and looking for ways of how we can support them. And I think that's one, of the most important areas that we've seen, at least in the cacao cooperatives. I'm also reading here a very interesting comment that Arnaud Montmanche just mentioned in the chat, and he's saying that, the craft chocolate makers are doing a lot of effort since many years. They are paying minimums of 40% more for the ingredients than bigger actors. And this is super interesting as well to read and to see, because indeed, we, the craft chocolate, we're trying to pay more, or we're paying more, but it's very important the impact that we are having on the cacao producing companies. And sometimes I think it's super important, of course, to pay more for our cacao, but I think there are other many ways that we can support the producers that sometimes can have either bigger impact than paying bigger, more or higher prices. In our case, Conexión Chocolate, we pay over 35% of the above price to the market price, but try to as well get involved in the issues that the organizations have, and see how we can help again get survival or get resilience in the market. So again, that's what the Cacao and Chocolate Summit is here for.
And that's a good thing. It's wonderful to have these discussions. So let me turn a little bit more to retailing, to Jody and Spencer. So have you all seen demand patterns or seasonality change? And talk, if you can talk a little bit about, have you seen the price sensitivity of customers change? And Jody, I'll start with you.
Sure. So like you said at the top of the session, we are a tourist destination. So we're in fine chocolate and we're a tourist destination. And that does give us a buffer from some of the price sensitivity we might have if we were located somewhere else. I think just kind of going back to, what Jenny and Arcelia were saying, like for us, it's really important to convert people from commodity chocolates to fine chocolate, and doing that in a way that's accessible. So we're not trying to preach to them. And so, we're seeing consumers like really interested in doing the right thing once they know. A lot of our customers come in and they do not even know that chocolate comes from a cacao fruit, they have no idea. And so, I think we continue to see people asking for higher cacao percentage chocolates, and they don't mind paying more for that if they know that it's coming, from an ethical source and it's good quality. But it has to be followed by those two things: good quality and a good, trustworthy sourcing model.
And Spencer, how about you in terms of, have you seen seasonality changes or more or less price sensitive customers?
So I think the seasonality changes that we did see were more because of the pandemic. So I think that, that there was bizarrely a flight to quality during the pandemic. So Easter in particular, which is normally not a fantastic time for craft chocolate. Actually last year, not this year, last year was very good. This year was good, but not absolutely fantastic. I mean, we managed to hold on to some of it, but I don't think anybody did as well, this year as they did last year. So I think there's been a bit of seasonality confusion because of the pandemic. But I don't think that's really changed there with it. I think the pricing one is really problematic. If you're at retail, if you're wholesaling, it's been really hard to push through many prices. I mean, really, really hard, and people have tried everything from reducing the free shipping levels that you supply to everything like that. I think with customers, again, you if you lead on the price, you are going to struggle. And there are clearly price points when you break them and it does make a difference. So, and these are pretty obvious. If you go above, if £5, that is, it puts you in a different league. If you go above £10, it puts you in another league. But I think we are dealing with a product where people are aware of the fact that you're, paying a fine flavor. And if you go out to the pub, if you go out to a cafe, you're going to be paying far more there than you are going to be paying for a fine craft chocolate bar. And that's the sort of way that you have to think about it. So I think Jody's point about this, being educational, being an experience, being a bit like tourism, I don't think we should apologize for it. I mean, in other industries, the prices are going stratospheric because, they've become status symbols. So, like the price paid for craft beer or the price paid for fine wines. And I think that we need to sort of stand our ground and say, look, if you want something which is going to teach you about flavor and, explain to you how different beans, different fermentations works, this is the way to do it. I mean, I think we have to be, I think one thing, maybe we'll touch on this later, is we have to be better at defining what we mean by craft chocolate and, why you should be doing it. I mean, we're not very good as a group. We don't have the equivalent of the specialty coffee industry. We don't have the equivalent of the craft beer guys. And I think we need something like that to sort of give us a bit of fighter cover to explain why it's worth paying more. People are in everyday lives, and you don't go to a doctor because he's cheap. You go to a doctor because he's good. You don't buy a bottle of wine because it's cheap unless you want to get drunk. You buy a bottle of wine because it's going to be good quality. And we don't yet really articulate well enough why and what and how to know. So I think we have to focus a little bit on that. And that's probably, there's questions about, well, what do we do to sort of, deal with these shocks which are coming up? I mean, I think we have to sort of start from the principle that this is worth paying for, and you should pay for it, and this is why, rather than apologizing for the price and trying to compete with the big chocolate companies, because we can't. They are commodity mass producers, and that's what they do. We don't do that.
I would just like to thank you, Spencer, for teeing that one up. The Fine Chocolate, not that you knew you were, the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, the Value Chain Committee, is doing a chocolate ecosystem and has we're launching a Wikipedia type environment where the community can help define terms and start to have a more nuanced and complex discussion around these issues, but also one where terms are specifically defined so that we can have these discussions and we're all using the same vocabulary. I think as Spencer mentioned, the Specialty Coffee Association, and I'm sure Jody knows this better than anybody, they have a standard flavor wheel. They've got standards. They have, grading systems. We're not there yet. And until we can all have the same conversation with the same vocabulary, it's very hard to move that forward, I think. All right, so I believe we have about 4 minutes left, if Gina could just confirm that. We are getting some Q&A over here. Steve DeVries is asking a question which I think could occupy entire discussions, but I'll throw it out there. He's saying farmers on average are paid 5% of retail. Why is it always the farmers that take the reduction in price? I mean, it's a good question. I think that's a very large discussion. Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab at it. I don't think that's entirely right. I mean, it is right, but it's not right. Actually, the 5% you're talking about there is for, it depends what sort of bar you're talking about, but generally for a craft chocolate bar, it's actually going to be a bit higher. But for mass-produced chocolate bar, that includes the farmers of all the other stuff that goes in there too, which is like sugar. And sugar is a commodity where there are lots of plays that you can make and work in it in a different way. The reason why anybody basically gets beaten up is because you've got more powerful suppliers than you've got more powerful farmers and growers. And that's true. And that's the way that, big mass-produced chocolate has set the industry up. And it's, our job to try and fix that to an extent. And there are, lots of people on this call, Jenny's on it, Arcelia's on it, but there are lots of other makers. I mean, Simran's on it. And, they're all basically trying to do the right thing, which is, this is not a commodity crop. I mean, commodity crops are designed to make mass-produced makers make lots of money by buying that as cheaply as possible. And they believe that they can create flavor in the factory. That's just nonsense. It's rubbish. It's awful. So, I mean, I think that's true of the mass-produced guys. But I mean, if we have a maker and they say to us they've got to charge more, we explain to them it's difficult for us to do that when we're putting you in a subscription box. But every other time, we just accept any price that anyone wants to sell to us at. That's the deal. We'll work with them on that. That's the deal. And we will basically try and sell it at whatever price they need to try and help the farmers. And that's what we have to do. I think when it comes to, it's what you were sort of saying, Lauren, as well, we'd like to have products which you can get people to try. That is slightly different. So like the taster bars, that does make it more affordable. I mean, I know that there was a comment in the chat that, you're paying for an experience, so you can justify it a bit more. Yes, but to try and get more and more people to try it is a good thing. So, I don't want to lose anybody from that. I mean, we do, but we think there's a limit to actually what you can expect somebody to come to a tasting for. So I think that why is the farmers the first person? Because that's the way we've set the industry up, and that's what we have to fix. That we just shouldn't allow it. We don't allow it. If we get told that Jenny wants to raise her prices, that's fine. We'll figure it out. We'll figure a way to deal with it. That's just what we've got to do.
And I think just, I know a lot of times, having been a craft chocolate retailer, as retailers, we're often like, why are you guys charging so much? It's like, unless I'm moving tons of volume, I can't make a living doing this either. And, I think to Jody's point, labor costs are very expensive. Real estate here is very expensive. It is extremely difficult, even what probably look like crazy prices to the farmers for what we're charging at retail. Like, it's hard for us to make a living too, because our costs, and as Spencer said, all the other things that have gone into it, the other, commodities, ingredients like sugar, the manufacturing process that Jenny and Arcelia do, all of these points mark it up. Then we get it. We've got crazy, real estate costs, rent costs, and crazy labor costs. And again, I think it's so true for all of our industry. Unless we're all moving volume, we're not going to impact stuff, right? So it's how do we move that volume at all levels, at the cocoa farmer level, at the retailer level? And we have to, as an industry, that's where having these conversations like the FCIA is doing around a glossary of terms, starting to try to drive the conversation forward in ways that we can also communicate with the consumer consistently, will help us get there faster. All right, I'm off my soapbox. So we have a number of questions. We actually have 10 more minutes. Unfortunately, I do not speak Spanish. So if somebody can please help translate some of the questions we're getting in Spanish, I want to make sure we're taking questions equally. Yeah.
Lauren, I already translated. It was Edison's.
Okay. Here we go.
So,
okay, let me see if I can. I only see it in Spanish.
So Edison is asking, what is the biggest challenge of the pandemic and what was learned from it, and what type of support is given to cocoa producers?
Okay, I think we kind of covered that, but if Jenny and Arcelia, if you want to add anything, that would be helpful.
Jenny?
That's a hard question for me because I talk a lot. But I think for us, what was our biggest learn is that I will say that in every issue, there is always an opportunity. So I always like to try to see the things that way. And I think, of course, we went through a very difficult times, but we were also trying to keep ourselves motivated, and as well with everyone that we've been working with, trying to somehow I think trying to see the things in a positive way. For us, that's very important all the time, because when you always see the problem, I don't think you see the solutions or the opportunities. So I went in the panel through our opportunities and how Conexión as well might be even an example of how the pandemic, impacted in our company positively. So. Arcelia, do you have any other point?
So in terms of, someone is translating for Edison, right? Maybe. So in terms of like support, what support is being offered? So in my case, I offer everything that is necessary. So if I need to go over there and take books, if they want to learn to make chocolate so that they can produce better cocoa, I teach them to make chocolate. I take the machines, I ship them chocolate bars from all over the world of different makers so that they can understand what the world is tasting when we're trying to sell our chocolate, our Brazilian chocolate next to a Madagascar chocolate, next to a Tanzania chocolate. And so I am different than other people though. So this is not the support that every cocoa producer is receiving in Brazil or in the world, right? So I think this is a question that is going to be different for every chocolate maker.
Okay, I've been sent some questions in WhatsApp. Give me a second here. Okay, so this is also about cocoa producing communities. I don't think we've touched on it. Is there, have they been provided any kind of support? I don't, maybe from the government or other groups through this, and how have you seen them being resilient?
I wouldn't know how to answer that in terms of like the government support. We in Brazil, we have a chocolate makers association. I know the cocoa producers have several associations. And so within those groups, they do receive mentorship, they receive resources. So, some of them are government related. I just don't know what type it would be.
How about in Ecuador, Jenny? Anything coming from groups or government?
Do you mind repeating the question, Lauren?
Yeah, what is the support given to cocoa producing communities, and how would you apply resilience with them? I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about some of this, but if there's anything you have to add about any support that they're getting either from government or other sources, that would be great.
Well, I will say that MOCA had a big role these last years. I think, of course, MOCA project started before the pandemic, but it was they play a very important role in Ecuador. And then also the Ecuadorian government had a project called the Cacao and Chocolate. The Coffee and Cacao project that it also had a good impact, and they worked together with the MOCA project on trying to develop skills and give training, technical training to the cacao cooperatives. I think that happened before. Unfortunately, the governmental cacao and coffee project ended, but I know that MOCA is still around and now working directly with the Cacao Association and the Cacao, the Cacao Association in the country, and again trying to develop more skills, and one of them is also the flavor profile map they will be developing soon.
Okay, there's one question over here that again could be an entire panel, but I'm gonna throw it out there and I'm gonna say something, and if Spencer, they've addressed it to Spencer, but I'm gonna say something. If Spencer wants to jump in, feel free. But Shobitha is asking why outfits like IICCT are not able to do what the SCA for coffee has yet. So it's interesting. As I said, I'm president of the board of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association. And, there's a lot of, if you want to have a standardized vocabulary and tasting protocol, it's got to be something that the industry, at least this is my view, it's got to be something that the industry agrees to, right? And there's a lot of players in the industry. And so there are groups discussing this. I am not privy to them. but there's a lot of players in there, and IACCT is part of it, having those discussions. But I was talking to somebody in the specialty coffee industry and saying, like, you guys have this wonderful flavor wheel, everyone's agreed on it. And he said, yeah, and it took us 25 years to get there. So I guess I would say it is a surprisingly political discussion within the industry. Again, unedited comments. And so I think it's just showing that it took the SCA 25 years to get there. It's people are talking about it. I don't know what progress they're making, but I think we do need to get there. I'm curious what Spencer thinks.
Yeah, so I think that it's a very good question, and there's quite a few different angles to it. So I think one bit is that, bluntly, the specialty coffee guys have done a much better job at drawing a line in the sand between what we would call fine chocolate and craft chocolate. And that's probably more than we want to go into here, but we get very confused about it. And I don't think we should allow that to perpetuate for much longer. I think Lauren is right. It did take the specialty coffee industry guys quite a long time to get there. But that sort of, we've also had quite a long time, and we still aren't sort of getting there very well either. I think that there's another issue which chocolate's got, just to sort of go on a sort of slightly strange hobby horse, which is that the addictive stuff in coffee is caffeine. The addictive stuff in chocolate is sugar. And that creates a whole bunch of problems for us. We basically are very, very different, and much more different, I think, than coffee is. I also don't think that the approach that the coffee guys have got is actually going to work for chocolate. I mean, the coffee, for those of you who don't know, and I'm sure that most of you do know it, basically specialty coffee is defined by a grading system on the farms where they basically test the beans for a quality level. People have tried that in chocolate, and for various reasons, I don't think it will actually work in the same way. But I think the last reason actually is probably the most interesting in a strange way, which is culturally, the coffee industry is actually more collaborative than the chocolate industry. The chocolate industry has always been amazingly secretive. So, sort of like kudos to Lauren and to Jenny and to everybody for actually going out there and actually trying to sort of reach out and try and get people to cooperate more. But, in the coffee industry, you can have people who are really absolutely hammer and tongs rivaling with one another, but they will work with one another. Whereas in the chocolate industry, we just don't, we just don't associate in the same way, I don't think. And we have to fix that. But I think that it's not as hard as it looks, provided we are willing to be as brutal as the coffee guys were and actually sort of saying, look, fine chocolate is not craft chocolate. It's different. And we have to be very, very clear as to what they mean and what we mean by it.
Yeah, and I will put one more plug in for that FCA glossary. I hope you all will go check it out and where we're headed with it, because that is a community-driven set of definitions so that we can all be on the same page and have these conversations, because you have to be speaking the same language before you can move things forward. Okay, I think we have 1 minute left. So I guess if that's correct, Gina, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up.
Yes, you got a tiny bit of wiggle room. If there was any more pressing questions.
Okay. Is there anything else any of you want to bring up or talk about? I'm looking at the questions over here.
I would just say, one of the reasons that Grocer's Daughter is behind the summit is that it is really important to push more of the value back down to the farmer, so that, this summit is one part of that, but knowledge, money, value adding closer to origin keeps more of the value there. And we're all, aware that this has been an exploitative, industry for a long, long time, as Spencer said. So, we have this moment in time to change that. And so I hope that everybody, remembers that as we're, talking the next couple of days about the industry, that we can all do a little part of changing, how exploitative this has been, and to bring the farmers, more engaged into the industry, so they're not just making that tiny percentage of the profits.
And I just want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And I look forward to those conversations. That's why I'm so proud of the summit, so proud of Jenny for doing all of this.
And I just wanted to add on to something, Spencer, you were saying. I think one of the things I'm actually most proud of the craft chocolate industry is it's one of the most collaborative industries I've ever worked in. So I mean, maybe the big guys aren't collaborative, but I feel like the small guys, everybody is really collaborative and willing to share and coach each other and help. And it's been such a pleasure to see that. Now, it is that's smaller. So like, how do we get that at a larger scale? But I feel like our segment of the industry is very good at that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to suggest that the craft chocolate guys don't cooperate a lot. They definitely do. But, I mean, if you pick any of the, I'm deliberately using this, if you pick any of the big 5 top companies, I mean, just look at the scientific research, for example. The coffee industry immediately publishes all of its research into flavor and everything else like that. Trying to get out anything which big chocolate is doing is just impossible. They know it, but they just won't sort of share it. So that sort of stuff there is very difficult. There was an interesting question as well about the term craft, which I'd love to pick up offline. So if you do want to pick that one up, I'm not convinced that craft is a bad term, but that may be because I'm talking with a different accent and I'm in a different place. I mean, craft beer has definitely done really, really well, and nobody's sort of saying that that's hand sort of rolled in its way. So maybe there is another term that we should be going for, but I mean, I think bean to bar has sort of been busted a bit, unfortunately, whereas I think craft maybe has a hope. But I mean, William, your question there was really good. So push it and definitely pick us up on it afterwards. And Lauren, I know, is going to be the person who's going to be leading more on that stuff.
Well, and I just want to say, it was interesting. I asked a guy from the Specialty Food Association who had been involved with all the craft brewers and some of the other organizations, how they handled size or how they ended up being so successful in what they were doing. And he said they stopped talking about size and they started talking about quality. And I think the key here is, we're all small, which is lovely, but if you really want to have an impact on the cacao farmer, you have to be able to scale. Like, that's the only way we're going to have an impact, is to get more consumers to eat fine chocolate and to be able to scale and do it in a way that we can actually impact the cacao farmers. And so I think talking about size is not necessarily hopeful in impacting the lives of cocoa farmers. So again, me on my soapbox. All right, so I think we do need to wrap up unless anybody has any parting words. I was gonna.
Yes, Arcelia
Yes.
or Jenny, any last parting words? We have 1 minute.
Yes, you should always choose chocolate made at origin. And I don't want to get anyone upset, but it helps a lot if you are consuming more chocolate made where the cocoa grows.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will say the same words. And I think, for us as Conexión Chocolate, our main goal was to connect the cacao producers with the industry, and of course being able to give each other the opportunity to know how every one of us is doing in our work. So thank you so much for valuing this chocolate and for supporting us, because without the consumers eating our chocolate, we're not able to move forward. So eat origin chocolate.
Well, thank you all so much. It's really wonderful to see you guys come together.
Gina, could I just say something in closing?
Yes, sure.
So I just wanted to thank all of you panelists. Thank you so much. And Jenny, thank you so much for organizing this and being the founder and having this as your vision. And I think, as you said earlier, if it weren't for COVID, we wouldn't be here online, and you've been able to impact so many more people and get so many more people involved in the discussion. And thank you so much for doing that. And thank you to Jody, Arcelia, and Spencer. This has been a really wonderful discussion. And Gina, thank you for everything you're doing, keeping us in line.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you all as well.